Let's do some drywall.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. Obviously you're watching this because you want to learn about drywall repairs. Hey, every house needs them. Either patches, stress cracks, there's always something to do in everybody's houses. That's why I stay busy with these drywall repairs. I run a full-time business 7 days a week. But this is just a common area. This is a kick hole. It's a very common issue, especially if you have kids in the house that rough play, running into the toys into the wall or something like that. Sheetrock is only a ½ inch thick, so it doesn't take really much to puncture the sheetrock. If you just hit it just right, kick it, anything. That's all it takes. Breaks the sheetrock, and then you have to call a drywall repairman. A patch like this will, cost you, $100 to $200 or so. So sometimes it's easier to try it yourself, or you could just watch these videos and say, hey, that's a little too much work for me to do. By the time you go buy the tools and everything you need, you might as well just call a professional. But hey, let's watch along. Maybe it's something you can tackle yourself, or maybe you decide watching this video, you better hire someone. But what I like to do is always put down masking to contain the area. It is messy. We have to cut out the area. I just use a 1x2 to make a square cutout. A lot of patch jobs I go to, the simplest thing you can do if you're going to hire someone, you can at least cut out the area and square it up, make it nice and clean. I always see people, they punch holes in the wall, hammer holes in the wall. It's like you'll probably get a better bid if you just clean up the area a little bit and just make it look presentable for an estimate. But it is what it is. Just use a 1x2 or 2x4 level, anything. Just get a square edge with a pencil, cut it out with a razor blade. Here I'm keeping a piece of the drywall. This you can take it to Home Depot or Lowe's or any paint store and get a paint match. So always keep your cutouts for a paint match. Once you get the area squared up, pull all your nails, screws, and the old framing. You always want to add screws. I use 1¼ inch, 1.5 screws for ½ inch sheetrock walls. Add plenty of screws on the outside existing sheetrock to tighten it up. I'm using 1x2s. You can lay them out however you want. You're just trying to get some backing in. So I'm going to run a piece on the bottom, and then I'm going to run a piece on top, and then I'm going to add another on the side. You really don't need this much, all 4 sides. You want to at least make sure you get both sides of the patch framed in. A lot of people think you can just use the existing studs, but you got to add backing. If you don't add backing, then you're going to have to cut the sheetrock opening from stud to stud, and we don't want to do that because it's going to make the job twice as big and twice expensive. Once you get your 1x2s or 2x4s in there, your backing, cut out your sheetrock. This is just a simple piece. It's a 1.5 by 1.5 piece of ½ inch sheetrock. Once you get this piece cut out, you want to add plenty of screws. Like on my other videos, I always add screws every 2 to 4 inches. Plenty of screws on all 4 sides. Wherever you put that backing in, you want to put screws on each side of it. Nice tight patch. We don't want it to crack out. Even though we're going to be fiberglassing and mudding it, you just don't want to get cracks. You don't want to do all this work and then a week later it cracks out. So add plenty of screws, plenty of backing. Screws and backing are cheap. Coming back to do the job is not so cheap. Once you get all the screws installed, you always want to take a 6-inch knife and scrape the sides of the patch. You always want to scrape all the goobers off and all the rough stuff because we're going to use fiberglass mesh tape. So you want to make sure no nails are sticking out, nothing's sticking out. Here I had some caulking by the baseboard, cut that out. Once you get everything scraped up, use fiberglass mesh tape. Always use fiberglass mesh tape on patchwork. There is a paper tape people use or fiberglass infusion tape. The fiberglass infusion is good, but I'm just using a regular fiberglass mesh tape. If you're going to use paper tapes, you're going to have to let it dry overnight. So if you're just going to do patchwork, just use a fiberglass mesh tape. It's more airproof and you won't get no mistakes with the fiberglass. It's a stronger patch. I'm using a hot mud. You necessarily don't have to use hot muds to do a first coat on it. You can use a joint compound, but if you use a joint compound, you're going to have to let it dry overnight. This is a 5-minute mud. You don't have to use a 5-minute mud. You can use a 20-minute mud, 40-minute, 90-minute, whatever you're comfortable using. If you're not comfortable using hot muds, of course, use a joint compound. And with the joint compound, you just let it dry overnight and then sand it. With this 5-minute mud, I like to use hot muds because I like to come to the job one time, get it done and textured in one trip. Once you get the mud mixed up, you want to push it into the grooves of the fiberglass mesh so you know it's getting inside the grooves and the gaps of the patch. And then I'm just doing a nice thick first coat. I'm not building up the mud. I'm not leaving a big hump on the wall. You just want to put enough mud to coat the seam. We're not trying to put a big hump on the wall. Once you're done mudding, you always want to wash up your tools, especially if you're using hot muds. Wash your tools out right away. You don't want this stuff drying in your pan and knife. It's like scraping cement out of your tools. While the mud's setting up, the 5-minute mud, you want to get everything ready. And now I'm just taking a wet sponge. This is for hot muds. You do this on all the hot muds. A 6-inch knife and a wet sponge. A slick out technique. It's not sanding. It's a slick out technique. We're just slicking it out before the hot mud sets up. It's a 5-minute mud, so this is about 4 to 6 minutes. And the mud's starting to set up. It's not fully set up, and you're working the mud. You're just taking off the extra mud. Taking off. So you don't want a big hump on the wall. You're just putting enough mud to coat the patch. Now I'm going to do a second coat. I don't need as much mud as before, and I'm going to make it just a little thinner than my first coat. So you just want to do a nice tight skim coat. The first coat's already on there. The second coat's more of a skim coat just to make it nice and perfect. Nice, perfect, smooth patch. Mix it up thoroughly. Use a 12-inch knife, 10-inch knife. Nice tight second coat. We're skimming it tight. We're not putting a big hump on the wall. The patch is already coated. The second coat and third coat's always a skim coat just to basically fill in. And you can also go the opposite direction to fill in. Once you're done using your hot muds, always wash up. You don't want these tools drying up. If you don't have a hose handy, of course you can use a 5-gallon bucket and a sponge and clean up in the bucket. Once the hot mud's drying, I'm letting it set up, so I'm just getting it ready. I'm getting my texture ready. This is a spray knockdown, so I'm going to use a joint compound. Always use joint compounds for your spray textures. Never use hot muds. I have it in the bucket, so it's ready to go. So I just dump off the water. They call that capping off the bucket. I dump off the excess water, mix it up thoroughly, make sure the tip's ready to go on the hopper. I'm just going to scoop up some mud. I don't need a lot of mud, just a half a hopper. This hopper I'm using is from Hyde Tools. I like this hopper. I recommend using it. There's other hoppers, but hey, this little hopper, it packs a punch, and I like this little Hyde Tools hopper. With the knockdown, you're going to need a nice clean 6-inch knife and a wet sponge. This second coat's setting up, so I'm doing the same thing like I did with the first coat. I'm going to slick it out. I'm taking off the extra mud, basically slicking it out. I'm pushing down hard with my knife, and I'm taking off the extra mud. Any lap marks, nothing. I'm taking everything off, feathering off the edge of the mud. Take off the extra mud. Basically, if I paint it now, it'd be a perfect, smooth patch. This is a spray knockdown, so I'm going to spray it heavy. I'm going to go each direction. Nice, consistent spray pattern. You don't want to just spray every direction. Nice, consistent. Cross it off, go the opposite direction, and then feather the spray past the patch. Basically, I'm just going to angle to almost angle, so it's almost a perfect patch the whole wall. But I like to pull my masking, get it all the way, because I don't want boogers and stuff getting in my texture when I'm going to knock down. Nothing's worse than getting stuff in your texture when you're knocking down. Nice clean 6 with a sponge. And I'm just going to lightly knock it down. This is a knockdown, spray knockdown. You're just lightly knocking down. A lot of guys like to use bigger knives. I'm just using a perfect straight-inch 6-inch knife. You can have more control with a little 6-inch knife than you can with a big knife. So always knock down with a little knife.